Hello everyone. Now, I know I've done screencastifys for all the content stuff, but a few students have been asking me to make screencasts for kind of skills based things that are actually maybe a bit more complicated, that you should be able to use, during time to revision and like, at night when I'm not there, obviously. So the first thing I'm going to start off, this first video is going to be a very basic outline about what the AOs actually are. Now, you should really know what the AOs are in terms of AO1, AO2, AO3, but I will go through that today as well. But I also want to go into a bit more detail about, what it is, the skills you're expected to learn, the skills you're expected to know, the skills you're not expected to know as well. So this shouldn't be too long. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples about how these skills come up essentially in exam questions, which is obviously the most important thing. So in front of you, some of you may know this, is what's called Bloom's taxonomy of skills. So starting at the bottom, with remember, you've got your more basic cognitive skills, the things that don't really take up that much cognitive power, the things that are relatively easy, the things that a third of your grade is going to be based on. So if we have a look, if we have a look down the bottom, we've got the two most basic cognitive skills are what we would call AO1, which is knowledge. So when we're talking about AO1, we are talking about knowledge, the ability to remember something and understand something. It's basically what your whole GCSEs were, not really difficult cognitive skill. It's basically a memory test. There's no skill to remembering. AO1 is basically you telling me something, right? So it's you, if me saying describe. So if you get a question to say describe, they're asking you for AO1. If you get outline, if you get name, if you get identify, these command words at the start of a question will determine what AOs they are. So if I were to say to you, describe the theory of systematic desensitization, you're not applying, you're not evaluating, you are just simply telling me something that you remember. You are parroting it, you remember it. Now you can kind of split AO1 into like knowing something and understanding something. So if you have a look, understanding something is more difficult than just remembering something. So let's say I were to ask you, what are the 5 stages to Freud's psychosexual stages, basically, and you remember it, you've remembered it, you've rehearsed it: oral, anal, phallic, latency, genital. That would be remembering. That would be, just remembering something in order. But that, just because you remember something doesn't mean you actually understand something. So for example, I say to you, what are the 5 stages? You go oral, anal, phallic, latency, genital. And I go, all right, well, tell me a bit more about the oral stage. And I'm like, I don't know, I just remembered oral, anal, phallic, latency, genital. So do you see, remembering something is really, really not that difficult. It's surface level knowledge. It's not deep knowledge whatsoever. So when we're talking about understanding, AO1 still, it's, you have to remember something, but you also have to really, really understand it. Really understand it. So these are the two most basic. These are the AO1 is the most basic thing you're going to need to understand. Understanding and remembering come under AO1. Right. So it takes up about a third of your grade, which I'll show you in a second. The more complicated bit, and I actually think this is the hardest one for students, because students think they are good at this, but they're not good at this. Is taking what you know and applying it onto a certain situation. Now, the exam will give you what are called stems, scenarios that Jenny is going through, or Jarrett, or Shahib, or anyone. These scenarios that people are going through, and you have to take your knowledge and apply it onto this scenario. So you see how AO2 is difficult, because you're doing two things. And here's the important thing about AO2, AO3. AO2, AO3 cannot be done without AO1. You cannot apply what you don't understand. You cannot evaluate what you don't understand. So AO1 is the easiest. It probably is the most important, because without AO1 you can't do AO2, AO3. So when we get to AO2, you are applying the facts, the rules, the concepts, the ideas. You are taking your knowledge and then you're applying it onto a certain situation. Now, why do students think they're good at this? Because they think if they just whack on a direct quote that they are applying. And people who are good at applications go beyond the STEM. And I'll show you an example of this in a second. But people who are generally good will apply it, beyond what the STEM has given them. Applying is not the hardest cognitive skill. It's the one that students probably are worse at, because they spend more time on evaluations because they think they're good at applications. But apply probably isn't the hardest cognitive skill. What is the hardest? You do have to analyze. Partially have to analyze. There is, a 12 marker at the end of paper 2 where you have to create a design study. But generally speaking, the hardest cognitive skill of creativity and the third hardest skill cognitively of analyzing, you don't really have to do that much. What you will have to do a lot, and this is AO3, is you will have to evaluate what you know. You have to look at strengths, you have to look at weaknesses, you have to discuss, and you have to really do that in a very, very skilled way. Now, there will be other videos in which I'm going to tell you how exactly to evaluate, how to write appeal, how to kind of think off the top of your head in terms of how to write appeal. But that's not what this video is about. This is just basically outlining evaluations. So I just want to show the spec to you. This is Bloom's taxonomy, by the way. I just want to show the spec to you because at the back, a little seen part of the spec is this little bad boy here, which is basically an outline of how much AO1, AO2, AO3 you are likely going to get in each paper. So as you can see, we've got AO1 knowledge here, we've got application here, we've got evaluation here, and as you can see, you got your total weightings of all of these. And as you can see, there is actually slightly more AO3 across the 3 papers, slightly more AO3 across the 3 papers in terms of how much you're going to sit. Roughly speaking, it's a third for AO1, AO2, and it's slightly more than a third. This is why those people who say, oh, but it worked to GCSE, are stupid, because GCSE is just AO1. A-level is AO1, AO2, A3, like harder skills. You can fake AO1. You can fluke AO1. You can say something vague and get away with it, but you cannot fluke skill. It's either there or it's not. And generally speaking, you cannot fluke consistent peels the whole time. It's a skill. It's like I say, it's there or it's not. So if you are one of these people who are going to revise really late, for example, and revise, I should say, your flashcards, your revision materials only give you the AO1. They do not give you the AO2. They do not give you the AO3. Only practice exam papers, mock papers, 16 mark practice, like understanding the structure, only that is going to give you the skill. But these people who think that they can just waltz on by the A levels like they did their GCSEs, not going to get very far, because over 2/3 of the course is actually based on skill rather than knowledge. And I just want to take it paper by paper, because paper 1, right? Paper 1, which it would be your cap 2, possibly your cap 3. I don't know, but definitely a cap 1, a cap 2. Sorry. If you have a look at what the percentages are here, so cap 1 is mainly describe and evaluate. There's not really that much. Under 10% of your grade will come from AO2 in paper 1. There is really not that much of AO2 applications. So you have to know your stuff when it comes to paper 1. Social influence, memory, attachment, psychopathology. You really have to know the theories quite well, but you also have to be able to evaluate those off the top of your head as well. There's not going to be much demand on the AO2 here. But if you look at paper 2, look how much. Nowhere across any of this are the percentages bigger than AO2 in paper 2. Why the hell do you have to be so good at applying in paper 2, which is approaches, biopsychology, and a double helping of research methods. Because that double helping of research methods, you are constantly applying it to the study that the psychologist is doing. You have to say why volunteer sampling is good in this study. You have to constantly apply your knowledge. And I would say, look at how much percentages there are here. That probably is where people will score least. People are not. Paper two is traditionally the worst performing paper. People do not do well in paper two, not just because it's research methods, but mainly because it's application and research methods, and people are not particularly good at applying, as I say. But again, paper one is the third, paper two is the third, paper three is the third, and again, paper three looks a little bit like paper one in the sense of it's AO1, it's AO3. But again, look how much more of AO3 there is compared to AO1. So what I'm saying here is you have to take each paper differently. You are not really going to be applying that much in terms of AO3 in paper two or AO1 in paper two. That the emphasis is going to be much heavier on paper AO2. So whilst you have to be as prepared as possible for the exams, A1, A2, A3, you have to be really good at all of them. It's a good idea to know what to expect going into the exams. Paper one is going to be mainly describe and evaluate. Paper two is going to be crazy heavy on the applications. And some of the questions, by the way, you're not even going to realize they are getting you to apply for. You have to look at the last three words in this study. If it says that, you have to apply really heavily, contextualize really heavily. And then paper three is going to be AO1 and A3 mainly, but it's going to be more towards the old AO3. So it's important. But how are these actually going to come up? So if you get a look at this document, which I know my students have, I don't know if other students will. If I were to just type in AO1, this is giving me a few questions kind of thing, but I'm going to look for something that's giving me just AO1, just AO1. So if we have a look here, for example, this question here is identify and briefly discuss 2 reasons why people have criticized invited research. Well, the discuss bit here is AO3. So this question is not entirely AO1. It's just the identify. So you get what the AO in play is by the command words that are being used. I'm looking for just a pure 6 marker. If I were to type in, for example, that's going to narrow it down quite a bit. Okay, here we go. So AO1 questions are easy. They are, I would say, embarrassingly easy personally. Let's have a look at this question just here. This question right here, all it is getting you to do is just tell me your knowledge. Don't apply it, don't evaluate it, don't do any of the harder skills. It's just asking you to outline 2 explanations for obedience. 6 marks. So 3 marks for agentic state, 3 marks for authoritarian personality. That's easy, right? That is literally you getting your flashcards and vomiting on the paper, but doing it in a sophisticated and eloquent way. That's easy. How else might it come up? I mean, as you can see, AO1 is 6, comes up quite a lot in 16 markers. AO1's relatively easy. But here's what I want to show you with AO2. AO2 always comes in with a stem. Always comes with a stem. So, for example, as you can see, if I click on this one here is about Steph and Jeff. So the AO2 is actually only worth 4 marks here. You get many more marks for AO1 and AO3. But because there is a stem, in this case about Steph and Jeff, you immediately know there's going to be some application involved here. Now, what I'm looking for here is an AO2 specific, just an AO2 type. Now, can AO2 come up in AO1, AO3? Yes, of course it can. I've just shown you a question there. But have a look at this question. So you have to actually read the stem just here. Um, so a senior army instructor is advising new instructors how to ensure discipline in training classes. He says always wear your instructor jacket, that's uniform, and stand up close when given instructions, that's proximity. Make sure all understand who has responsibility for the exercise. Serious problems should always be dealt with in the instructor's office, that's location. So the question in this case is referring to research into obedience. Explain 3 reasons why the instructor's advice should be effective. Now, this is actually quite a complicated question because you actually have to refer to Milgram here, referring to the research into obedience. Explain 3 reasons. So you have to talk about Milgram and also apply. So let me give you an example about what I mean about going beyond the stem. So explain 3 reasons why the instructor's advice should be effective. You should direct quote here. So, for example, one thing you might want to say is, according to Milgram's research, uniform is very, very important. Milgram said it gives people an authoritative, I don't know, feeling or whatever. And then you have to say, for example, in the stem, the instructor was told that he should, quote, always wear your instructor jacket, close quote. Now, what you could do here, I don't know how good this example is here, but you could say something like, for example, at the end of the day, when the senior army instructor has done his job, he will take off his jacket because there is no need for him to be authoritative anymore. He's going to go back to his wife or husband. That's what I mean by going beyond the stem. Right? Say something that's not necessarily in the stem, but you are applying. That is advanced application for you to be able to do that. It's amazing if you can apply something that's not even in the stem. That is what I say to students, is to show advanced application, is to go beyond that, but obviously it has to be quite logical. AO2 questions are purely AO2 questions are relatively rare outside of research methods. What is less rare outside research methods is AO3. Now, if I were to type in AO3, I mean, how many times it come up? We've got 170 questions here, 170 questions that have had AO3 in the past. If I were to, let's have a think about this, look for AO3 type questions that are just AO3 type. We'll skip through these ones because these are AO1 and AO3. AO1, AO2, AO3, AO1 essays. There's loads of essays and social influence that come up like this. Here we go. So here is one. I don't know why. Surely that's not an actual question. Let's find another one, actually. I don't like that one. Yeah, here we go. Here's one that came up a couple of years ago. So we're talking just AO3 questions. Can you get evaluation when you have to outline applied knowledge, understanding? Yes, you can, but I'm just focusing on the AO3 type questions. This is the question in play just here. So ignore that one above it because it's not relevant. Briefly evaluate Bowlby's monotropic theory. In your answer, refer to multiple attachments and the role of the father. Now, again, that's quite a difficult evaluation here, but it's what you cannot do in this case. The worst thing for you to do is to see this question, briefly outline Bowlby's monotropic theory, and then outline it. It does. Briefly evaluate Bowlby's monotropic theory. The worst thing to do is outline it because it's completely not going to be credit worthy. They're just going to completely ignore it. Yes, we know you know the AO1, but by you writing AO1 when you're supposed to be writing AO3, it doesn't highlight that you know AO1, it highlights that you don't know AO3. So stick to the question here. Briefly evaluate Bowlby's monotropic theory. In your answer, refer to multiple attachments and the role of the father. You might say off the top of my head that Bowlby's monotropic theory is socially insensitive. That's your point. Elaborate. Why is that important? Well, it's important because it reduces the reputation of psychology, and therefore people aren't going to take psychology or attachment theory seriously, which could have serious consequences in, say, nursing or orphanages, for example. Where's the evidence? I could be bullshitting here. So Bowlby specifically stated that mothers are the primary caregiver, and he completely ignored the role of the father in terms of actually raising the kid, which could offend loads of fathers. So that would be one point in this case. But when it comes to evaluation, what I've just done there is I cannot evaluate Bowlby if I don't know Bowlby. I cannot just make it up, because the examiner's going to see straight through that, and and then all of a sudden he or she will look at all your other work and be like, well, they're clearly making it up. They look through it like crappy tainted glasses. Basically, everything they see of what you're writing is crap. So don't try BS the examiner, because they won't fall for it. So that is a basic run through of AO1, AO2, AO3. A lot of you may probably know this anyway, so it is just a basic run through of those people who didn't, but it is super useful to go through this. Any questions, as always, send me an email, but I will speak to you later.